Let me start by asking you something strange. When was the last time you touched a tree? Not walked past one. Not glanced at one through your car window on a Tuesday commute. I mean, actually stopped, placed your hand flat against the bark, and just stood there. If you're like most people, you probably can't remember, and I don't blame you. We live in a world that has taught us to move fast, stay connected to screens, and measure productivity in emails sent and notifications cleared. The idea of walking up to a tree and pressing your palm against it sounds like something a quirky aunt would suggest at a family reunion right before she starts talking about her crystal collection. But here's the thing. What if I told you that behind this seemingly absurd, almost childlike act, there's a growing body of scientific research, from immunology, from neuroscience, from cardiovascular medicine, from microbiology, that suggests touching a tree might be one of the single most underrated health interventions available to a modern human being? And what if I told you that the reason it works has almost nothing to do with spirituality, nothing to do with vibes, and everything to do with electrical charges, bacterial ecosystems, nervous system architecture, and the chemical your body produces that is literally killing you slowly right now as you listen to this? Stay with me, because this is going to get strange, and then it's going to get undeniable. Let's rewind for a moment. In the late 1980s, something unusual was happening inside the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries. A researcher named Tomohide Akiyama was working on a concept that didn't really have a name yet. The idea was deceptively simple. Could spending time in forests, not hiking, not exercising, just being among trees, produce measurable changes in human health? He called it Shinrin-yoku. In English, it's often translated as forest bathing, and for a while, the Western scientific community didn't take it very seriously. It sounded poetic but vague, soft, unquantifiable. Then the data started coming in. By the early 2000s, a Japanese immunologist named Dr. Ching Li, a professor at the Nippon Medical School in Tokyo, had begun conducting controlled experiments on forest bathing. Not surveys, not questionnaires about how people felt, actual blood panels, hormone assays, immune cell counts. And what he found was startling. After a 3-day forest bathing trip, during which participants simply walked slowly through a forest, touched trees, breathed the air, and rested among the canopy, their blood showed a significant increase in a type of immune cell called natural killer cells. These are the cells your body uses to seek out and destroy virus-infected cells and early-stage tumor cells. They are, quite literally, part of your body's frontline defense against cancer. But it wasn't just a small bump. In some subjects, natural killer cell activity increased by nearly 50%. And here's the part that made the research community sit up. That increase lasted for more than 30 days after the trip. 30 days. From walking in a forest. Now, if a pharmaceutical company created a pill that boosted your natural killer cell count by 50% for a month, it would be on the cover of every medical journal in the world. There would be a Super Bowl commercial. There would be a wait list. But because the mechanism was trees and dirt and bark and air, most of the Western world shrugged. Dr. Li didn't shrug. He dug deeper. And what he found next changes the way we need to think about trees entirely. So here's the question that haunted Dr. Li's research. Why were the trees doing this? Was it just the relaxation of being in nature? Was it the reduction in cortisol from escaping the city? Was it the gentle exercise of walking on uneven terrain? All of those things matter, but they weren't the full explanation. Because when Dr. Li compared forest bathing to a similar walk in an urban environment, same duration, same level of physical activity, same social setting, the forest group showed dramatically higher immune function. The city walkers did not get the same benefit. Something about the forest itself was biologically active, and that something turned out to be invisible. Trees, it turns out, are not just standing there quietly doing nothing. They're chemical factories. Every single day, trees release a class of organic compounds called phytoncides. If that word sounds unfamiliar, think of it this way. Phytoncides are essentially the tree's immune system, aerosolized and broadcast into the surrounding air. Trees produce phytoncides to protect themselves from insects, bacteria, and fungi. They are antimicrobial, antifungal defense molecules. And when you walk through a forest, you are breathing them in with every single breath. Here is what's remarkable. When Dr. Lai isolated specific phytoncides, compounds like alpha-pinene and D-limonene, both commonly released by pine, cedar, and cypress trees, and exposed human natural killer cells to them in a laboratory setting, those cells became significantly more active. Not in a forest, not in a walk, in a petri dish. The chemical itself was directly stimulating immune function. Think about that for a moment. The air in a forest is not just fresh air. It is, in a very real biochemical sense, medicine. It is a cocktail of volatile organic compounds that your immune system recognizes and responds to. And this happens not through some mystical connection between humans and nature, but through receptor pathways in your cells that have been shaped by millions of years of coevolution with plant life. You didn't evolve in a cubicle. You didn't evolve in a subway car. You evolved surrounded by trees. And your body still remembers. But breathing near a tree is one thing. What about touching it? This is where the story takes a turn that I genuinely did not expect when I started researching this topic. Let's talk about something most people have never heard of, and it starts with a question that sounds almost ridiculous. Are you electrically grounded right now? If you're sitting in a chair wearing rubber-soled shoes inside a building surrounded by electronic devices, the answer is almost certainly no, and that matters far more than you might think. In the early 2000s, a retired cable television executive named Clint Over had a strange epiphany. He had spent decades working with cable systems, and he understood that every piece of electronic equipment needs to be properly grounded, connected to the earth, to function without interference, static, or signal degradation. Without grounding, systems become noisy, erratic, unstable. One evening, Ober looked around at the people walking by him in a park, all wearing rubber-soled shoes, and had a thought that would consume the rest of his career. What if the human body, which is, after all, a bioelectrical system, also needs to be grounded? And what if the invention of rubber-soled shoes, which became widespread in the 1960s, had silently disconnected us from the Earth's electrical field? Now I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like pseudoscience. I thought so too. But Ober wasn't content to just theorize. He partnered with biophysicists and cardiologists, and they began running studies. The results have since been published in peer-reviewed journals, including the Journal of Environmental and Public Health, the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, and the European Journal of Physics. And the findings are consistent enough to warrant serious attention. When the human body is in direct electrical contact with the earth, whether through bare feet on soil, hands on stone, or, notably, skin on a living tree, there is a measurable transfer of free electrons from the Earth's surface into the body. The Earth, it turns out, carries a mild negative electrical charge. And your body, particularly when inflamed, carries excess positive charge in the form of free radicals, molecules that are missing an electron and will tear through your tissues looking for one. This is not metaphor. This is electrochemistry, when you make direct skin contact with the ground or with a living tree, which is itself grounded through its root system deep into the earth, free electrons flow into your body and neutralize free radicals. This process is chemically identical to what antioxidants do, except you're not swallowing a supplement. You're receiving electrons through your skin. Dr. Stephen Sinatra, a board-certified cardiologist, and Dr. James Oshman, a biophysicist, published research showing that just 30 minutes of grounding reduced blood viscosity, the thickness of the blood, by a significant margin. Thick blood is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. It leads to clotting, poor circulation, elevated blood pressure, and increased strain on the heart. They also measured cortisol levels. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. In small amounts, it's essential. It wakes you up in the morning, helps you respond to danger, and regulates your metabolism. But in the chronically elevated amounts that most modern humans carry due to stress, sleep deprivation, screen exposure, noise pollution, and social pressure, cortisol becomes a slow poison. It suppresses immune function. It promotes fat storage around your organs. It degrades your hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory. It accelerates aging at the cellular level. When subjects in the grounding studies made direct contact with the earth for even short periods, their cortisol levels normalized. Not just dropped, normalized. The circadian cortisol rhythms, which in stressed individuals become flat and dysregulated, began to restore to their natural curve, high in the morning, tapering through the day, low at night. And here's where the tree comes back into the picture. A living tree is one of the most effective grounding conductors in nature. Its root system extends deep into the earth, often mirroring the reach of its canopy above. The moisture in its bark, the mineral content of its living tissue, and the conductive pathways of its vascular system make it, electrically speaking, a direct extension of the Earth's surface. When you place your hand on a tree, you are not just touching wood. You are closing a circuit. You're allowing your body to equalize its electrical charge with the planet. And your nervous system, which operates on tiny electrical impulses measured in millivolts, responds almost immediately. This is measurable. It shows up on EEGs. It shows up in heart rate variability data. It shows up in thermographic imaging, where inflammation visually decreases within minutes of grounding. But we're not done. Not even close. Because the electrical story is just one layer. And the next layer is, in some ways, even more extraordinary. I want you to imagine something. Imagine that underneath the forest floor, there's a network. Not a metaphorical network. An actual, physical, living network of biological filaments that connects nearly every tree in the forest to every other tree. A network through which trees share nutrients, send chemical warning signals about insect attacks, and even allocate resources to their sick and dying neighbors. This isn't science fiction. This is mycology. And the discovery of this network has fundamentally changed how biologists understand forests. In the late 1990s, a forest ecologist named Dr. Suzanne Simard, then working at the University of British Columbia, used radioactive carbon isotopes to trace the flow of nutrients between trees. What she found was breathtaking. Trees were not isolated organisms competing for resources. They were connected to a vast underground web of mycorrhizal fungi, thread-like fungal filaments called mycelium that attach to tree roots and create an information and nutrient superhighway beneath the soil. Simard called it the Wood Wide Web, and it's not a fringe idea anymore. It's taught in university biology programs around the world. Here's what makes this relevant to you and your hand on that tree. The mycorrhizal network doesn't just connect tree to tree, it creates a living biological interface between the tree and the soil, and by extension, between the tree and the microbial world. When you touch a tree, you're making contact with an organism that is interwoven with one of the most complex microbial ecosystems on the planet. And that ecosystem is talking to your immune system. Let me explain what I mean, because this is where the science gets really compelling. Your skin is not a wall, it's a membrane, and it is absolutely teeming with microbial life. You carry roughly as many bacterial cells on your body as you have human cells. Your skin microbiome, the community of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms living on your skin, is a dynamic, responsive ecosystem. And its composition directly affects your health in ways we are only beginning to understand. In 2012, a landmark study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, often called the Biodiversity Hypothesis paper, argued that the dramatic rise in allergies, autoimmune diseases, and chronic inflammatory conditions in the developed world was linked to a decline in our exposure to environmental microorganisms. Not pathogens, not the bacteria that make you sick, the vast, diverse community of benign and beneficial microorganisms that our immune systems evolved to expect. When you grow up in a hyper-sanitized environment, filtered air, hand sanitizer, concrete surfaces, sealed buildings, your immune system doesn't encounter the microbial diversity it was calibrated for, and so it starts misfiring. It begins attacking things it shouldn't. Pollen, pet dander, your own intestinal lining, your own thyroid gland. This is the mechanism behind the explosion of autoimmune and allergic diseases in the modern world. Not too many germs. Too few of the right germs. Now think about what happens when you touch a tree. The bark of a living tree is one of the most microbiologically rich surfaces in any natural environment. A single square centimeter of tree bark can harbor hundreds of species of bacteria, dozens of species of fungi, and a complex community of archaea, lichens, and microinvertebrates. Many of these organisms are found nowhere else. They are unique to that tree, that forest, that climate, that elevation. When your skin makes contact with that bark, there is an exchange. Not a massive, dangerous, infectious exchange, a subtle, gentle inoculation. Your skin microbiome is exposed to organisms it has not encountered in your daily sterile routine. And your immune system, which monitors your skin microbiome the way a security system monitors a building, takes notice. Research from the University of Helsinki, led by environmental scientists studying the health effects of biodiversity, has shown that people who have regular contact with natural surfaces, soil, bark, leaves, natural water, have measurably more diverse skin and gut microbiomes. And that diversity correlates strongly with reduced rates of allergic disease, lower levels of systemic inflammation, and more robust immune regulation. Your immune system doesn't get stronger from isolation. It gets stronger from conversation, and touching a tree is one of the most information-rich conversations your immune system can have. Now, I want to pause here, because I know some of you are tracking with me, and some of you are still skeptical. And I respect that skepticism. I share it. I'm not here to tell you that hugging an oak tree will cure your disease. I'm not here to sell you a product or push a belief system. What I am here to do is present you with a convergence of evidence from multiple independent fields of research: immunology, microbiology, biophysics, neuroscience, and ecology, that all point in the same direction. And that direction says physical contact with living trees triggers measurable, beneficial biological responses in the human body. But we haven't talked about the brain yet. And honestly, the brain might be the most important part. Let's talk about what happens in your nervous system when you touch a tree. Your skin contains several types of nerve fibers. The ones you're probably most familiar with are the fast-conducting A fibers. These are the nerves that tell you you've touched something hot, something sharp, or something that requires a quick reaction. They are the nerves of information and survival. But there is another class of nerve fibers in your skin that has only recently received serious scientific attention. They are called C-tactile afferents. CT afferents for short. And they are not about survival. They are about something else entirely. CT afferents respond specifically to slow, gentle touch, a caress, a hand running slowly through hair, a palm resting quietly on a warm surface. They fire optimally at a very specific speed, about 1 to 10 centimeters per second, and at skin temperature. They are essentially your body's neural wiring for comfort, connection, and safety. When CT afferents are activated, they send signals not to the somatosensory cortex, the part of your brain that processes tactile information like texture, pressure, and location, but to the insular cortex, a deep brain structure involved in emotional processing, interoception, and your felt sense of your own body's internal state. From there, signals cascade to the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, triggering a reduction in amygdala activation and a corresponding decrease in sympathetic nervous system arousal. In plain language, slow, gentle touch tells your brain that you are safe, not intellectually safe, neurologically safe. It shifts your autonomic nervous system from sympathetic dominance, the fight-or-flight state that most of us are stuck in for the majority of our waking lives, to parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest state, the state in which your body heals, your immune system activates, your digestion works properly, and your mind can actually think clearly. Now, here's a question nobody was asking until recently. Do CT afferents only respond to human touch? The answer is no. CT afferents respond to the qualities of the touch, its speed, its temperature, its texture, not to the identity of the thing doing the touching. When you place your palm against the bark of a tree and simply rest it there, the rough, warm, textured surface of the bark activates CT afferents across your palm. Your brain receives the same class of calming signals that it would receive from a comforting hand on your shoulder. The tree is not hugging you back, of course, but your nervous system doesn't know that. And in a world where many people are profoundly touch-deprived, a crisis that has only deepened in recent years, this matters enormously. Neuroscientist Dr. Francis McGlone at Liverpool John Moores University, one of the world's leading researchers on CT afferents, has argued that the modern epidemic of loneliness and anxiety is, in part, a crisis of touch deprivation. Your nervous system requires gentle, sustained touch to regulate itself. Without it, you remain in a chronic state of low-grade threat detection. Your cortisol stays elevated, your sleep is disrupted, your emotional regulation deteriorates. Your immune system is suppressed. Touching a tree, quietly and deliberately, for even 5 to 10 minutes, provides your CT afferent system with exactly the kind of stimulus it is starving for. And there is yet another dimension to this that we need to explore. It has to do with something called attention restoration. In the 1980s and 1990s, environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan developed what they called attention restoration theory. The core idea is this: modern life demands a type of cognitive effort called directed attention. Directed attention is what you use when you focus on a spreadsheet, navigate a conversation, drive in traffic, respond to emails, or make decisions. It's effortful, deliberate, and finite. It depletes. When directed attention is depleted, a state the Kaplans called directed attention fatigue, you become irritable, distractible, impulsive, and prone to poor decisions. Sound familiar? It should. It describes the baseline psychological state of most people in the developed world by mid-afternoon. The Kaplans propose that natural environments restore directed attention because they engage a different cognitive mode, what they called soft fascination. Natural stimuli like flowing water, rustling leaves, dappled light, and organic textures gently capture your attention without demanding anything from it. Your brain enters a state of what neuroscientists would later recognize as default mode network activation, a relaxed, expansive cognitive state associated with creativity, self-reflection, and emotional processing. Touching a tree amplifies this. It gives your brain a single, rich sensory anchor, temperature, texture, pressure, scent, that is complex enough to hold your attention but gentle enough to not demand it. You're not doing anything. You're not solving a problem. You're simply present with a living surface that your nervous system finds inherently interesting and inherently safe. Recent fMRI research has confirmed what the Kaplans suspected decades ago. Exposure to natural stimuli, particularly tactile engagement with natural surfaces, reduces activity in the subgenual prefrontal cortex, a brain region associated with repetitive, self-referential negative thinking. This is the part of your brain that runs your rumination loop, the what-if spiral, the 2 a.m. mental replay of every mistake you ever made. Contact with natural surfaces quiets it, not through distraction, through restoration. Now I want to bring all of these threads together because they weave into something remarkable. When you walk up to a tree, let's say a mature pine standing in a park on a quiet morning, and you place your bare hand against its bark, here is what happens in your body simultaneously. First, your skin makes contact with a surface that is teeming with microbial life. Hundreds of bacterial and fungal species begin a subtle exchange with your skin microbiome. Your immune system detects new microbial signatures and begins a process of calibration. Not alarm, but education. Your immune regulation improves at the interface of self and environment. Second, free electrons from the Earth's surface, conducted upward through the tree's massive root system and living tissue, flow into your body through the point of contact. These electrons begin neutralizing free radicals in your tissues, reducing oxidative stress. Your blood viscosity begins to normalize. Inflammatory markers begin to decrease. Third, with every breath, you inhale phytoncides, volatile organic compounds released by the tree's bark, leaves, and resin. These compounds enter your lungs, pass into your bloodstream, and reach your immune cells. Your natural killer cell activity begins to increase. Your immune surveillance sharpens. Fourth, the slow, steady pressure and texture of the bark against your palm activates CT afferents in your skin. These nerves send signals to your insular cortex, telling your brain that you are safe, that the world right now is not threatening you. Your amygdala quiets. Your sympathetic nervous system downshifts. Cortisol production begins to normalize. Your heart rate variability improves, a key marker of cardiovascular health and emotional resilience. Fifth, the soft fascination of the tree, its texture, its scent, the sound of its leaves, the dappled light through its canopy, engages your default mode network and begins restoring your depleted directed attention. Your rumination loop quiets. Your cognitive flexibility improves. You begin to think more clearly and feel more spacious. All of this, from touching a tree, not for an hour, not after a weekend retreat, within minutes. And I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be thinking, this sounds nice, but I live in a city. I don't have a forest. I barely have a sidewalk tree. And that's a fair concern. But here's what the research actually shows. You don't need a pristine ancient forest. You need contact with a living tree. Studies from urban environments, from Tokyo, from Seoul, from Helsinki, from London, have consistently shown that even urban trees, even trees in parks surrounded by concrete, provide measurable health benefits when people engage with them physically. The phytoncide concentrations are lower than in a dense forest, yes, but they're still present. The microbial diversity on urban tree bark is lower than in a wilderness setting, but it's still vastly greater than anything you'll find on an indoor surface. And the grounding effect, the nervous system calming, the attention restoration, these work regardless of the tree's zip code. Dr. Mary Carol Hunter at the University of Michigan published research showing that just 20 minutes in a natural setting, even a small urban park, was enough to significantly reduce cortisol levels. And other researchers have found that the effects are amplified when people physically touch natural elements rather than simply being near them. You don't need a pilgrimage, you need a tree. But let me take this one step deeper, because there's an aspect of this that I've been deliberately saving, and it's the part that, when I first encountered it, genuinely changed how I think about trees. Remember the mycorrhizal network, the Wood Wide Web, that I mentioned earlier? Dr. Suzanne Simard's work revealed that trees don't just share nutrients through this network, they communicate. When a Douglas fir is attacked by bark beetles, it sends chemical signals through the fungal network to neighboring trees, which then preemptively ramp up their own chemical defenses. When a mother tree is dying, it dumps its remaining carbon stores into the network, sending resources to its offspring and neighbors. Simard's research revealed something even more astonishing. Trees recognize their own kin. A mother tree, a large, mature tree connected to many younger trees through the mycorrhizal network, preferentially sends more nutrients to its own seedlings than to strangers. It recognizes them by their root chemistry. And when that mother tree is removed from the forest, say by logging, the survival rate of the surrounding young trees drops dramatically. Trees, in a way that is biologically precise and not at all metaphorical, take care of each other. Now, I am not going to tell you that a tree knows you're touching it. I am not going to claim that a tree has feelings or consciousness in the way that you or I experience them. That would be going beyond what the science supports. But I will tell you this. When you touch a tree, you are making contact with an organism that is deeply embedded in a living network of mutual support. You are touching something that has spent decades, sometimes centuries, standing in one place, converting sunlight into sugar, pulling water from deep in the earth, feeding fungal networks, sheltering insects and birds, filtering air, building soil, and quietly, without any recognition or reward, making the world around it more alive. And something in you, something that predates language, predates culture, predates civilization itself, recognizes that. There's a concept in biophilia research. The term biophilia was coined by the biologist E.O. Wilson that describes an innate human tendency to seek connection with other living systems. Wilson argued that this tendency isn't cultural, it's genetic. It's the result of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution in which our survival depended on our ability to read, respond to, and integrate with the natural world. Biophilia isn't a preference, it's a need. And like many needs, the need for sleep, the need for human contact, the need for clean water, we don't always notice it when it's unmet. We just slowly deteriorate. We become more anxious, more depressed, more inflamed, more disconnected from our own bodies, more reactive, less reflective. We develop chronic diseases at rates that our ancestors would find incomprehensible. We medicate, we scroll, we cope, and all the while there is a tree outside, waiting, not waiting with consciousness, not waiting with intention, just there, rooted, alive, chemically active, electrically grounded, microbially rich, ready to give your body what it has been quietly asking for. I want to address something else before we approach the end of this conversation, because I think it's important. Some of you might be feeling a resistance to this idea. Not an intellectual resistance. You can see the studies, you can follow the mechanisms, but a social resistance. A feeling that walking up to a tree and putting your hand on it is somehow weird, embarrassing, something other people might judge you for. And I understand that, truly. But think about what that resistance actually is. It's a learned response. It comes from a culture that has systematically devalued physical contact with the natural world and replaced it with engagement with machines. A culture that considers it completely normal to stare at a glowing rectangle for 8 hours a day, but considers it odd to stand quietly with your hand on an oak. That resistance is not wisdom, it's conditioning. And the irony is that the people you might be worried about judging you, the ones walking past the park staring at their phones, are the ones whose cortisol is elevated, whose immune systems are suppressed, whose nervous systems are locked in a state of chronic sympathetic activation, and whose attention is so fragmented that they can barely hold a thought for 30 seconds. You, with your hand on a tree, are the one whose biology is actually working correctly. So let me be practical for a moment. Because I don't want this to remain an interesting idea, I want it to become something you actually do. Here is what I'd suggest, and it's simple enough that simplicity itself is not an excuse to avoid it. Find a tree, any living tree, in your yard, in a park, on your street, on your walk to work, a tree you can visit every day or nearly every day. Approach it. Place your bare hand, no gloves, no fabric, flat against the bark. If it's a warm day and you can take your shoes off and stand on the earth at the same time, even better. But the hand is enough. Stand there. Don't set a timer. Don't try to meditate. Don't try to feel anything in particular. Just stand there and let your hand rest against the bark. Notice the texture. Notice the temperature. Notice whether the bark is rough or smooth, dry or slightly damp. Let your breathing slow on its own. Don't force it. 5 minutes is plenty. 10 is wonderful. But even 2 or 3 minutes is enough to initiate the grounding response, begin the CT afferent activation, and expose your skin to the tree's microbial community. Do this every day, or as close to every day as your life allows. You will not feel a lightning bolt of transformation on day 1. This is not a drug. It's not a hack. It is a slow, cumulative recalibration of your body's relationship with the living world. Orfeo dies in weeks. Many people report sleeping more deeply, feeling less anxious, thinking more clearly, and getting sick less often. These reports are consistent with the physiological mechanisms we've discussed. You might also notice something harder to quantify, a sense of steadiness, a feeling that you are, quite literally, more grounded, not in the self-help buzzword sense, in the electrical, neurological, biological sense that your body has reestablished a connection that it was designed to have and has been missing. Let me leave you with one final thought. There is a bristlecone pine in the White Mountains of California that is over 5,000 years old. It was alive when the pyramids were being built. It was alive when the first writing systems were invented. It has stood through every empire, every war, every plague, every revolution in human history, and it is still standing. It doesn't move. It doesn't speak. It doesn't produce content or update its status. It just grows, one ring at a time, 1 year at a time, drawing water from the earth, drawing light from the sky, feeding the network beneath its roots, making the air around it slightly more breathable, slightly more alive, every single day. And if you were to walk up to that ancient tree and place your hand on its bark, the same processes we've discussed today would begin. Electrons would flow. Phytoncides would enter your lungs. Bacteria would greet your skin. Your CT afferents would fire. Your amygdala would quiet. Your cortisol would dip. Your blood would thin. Your natural killer cells would stir. The tree wouldn't know, but your body would. 5,000 years of standing in one place, and it would still have something to give you. The question isn't whether this works, The convergence of evidence across multiple scientific disciplines is increasingly clear. The question is whether you'll slow down enough to receive it. There is a tree near you right now, closer than you think, older than you guess, more alive than you've given it credit for. Go touch it, and then come back tomorrow and touch it again. Your body already knows why.